Ethan Skolnick for Five on the floor on the Five Reasons Sports Network. This is the latest season ticket. And so here we are at one of the most significant days in recent Miami Heat history. And not just because the Miami Heat can advance to the NBA Finals to face old friend and now nemesis LeBron James, who is going to the NBA Finals for the 10th time. And that series would start on Wednesday if the Heat can close out tonight on Sunday night. But it's also significant because this is the 1-year anniversary of the introduction of Jimmy Butler by Pat Riley. That took a while. If you remember, Jimmy, after the acquisition from Philadelphia, took off for Europe, and there was no press conference. And then suddenly there was a press conference on September 27th, 2019, and I don't remember a press conference ever going better than that for the Miami Heat. Everybody sort of bought in with what Jimmy was saying, and over the last year, he has been a man of his word. So when we start with the three keys tonight, that's the first one. Close it out, Jimmy. Jimmy Butler has typically been a guy who has played better and harder when he's doubted than when he's a front runner. His entire history is not as a front runner. This is someone who was homeless at 13, who wasn't heavily recruited at all, who had to go to a junior college, then was drafted 30th overall, wasn't expected to be a huge part of that Bulls team. If you remember, the Miami Heat passed on Jimmy Butler in the draft to trade up and take Norris Cole instead. Well, now he's a max player. He's the leader of a franchise. He's aligned with Erik Spoelstra. He needs to be great tonight. It does not mean 40 points from Jimmy Butler, but it means sustained intensity, sustained excellence, and at the end of the game, closing it out with the right decisions, getting to the line, and making his free throws. So that's number one. Number two, what kind of Bam Adebayo are we going to see? I don't think he's healthy. He didn't look right to me in the last game. He wasn't kind of flying around like he typically does. I'm not quite sure that it's a wrist. I think it might be a shoulder. If you see the way that he's been sort of holding his arm down, it seems like that. And again, the Miami Heat are not going to reveal much about injuries. I always tell these stories about them hiding injuries, but I remember once being in the locker room in 2010 after the Heat lost in Boston. Remember, Dwayne Wade, pretty much a one-man team. Michael Beasley had been benched in that game. And then one of the Heat representatives came up to us after and said, oh, by the way, Quentin Richardson's having surgery tomorrow. We didn't even know Quentin Richardson had an injury. That's the way the Heat handle these things. So if Bam is hurt, they're certainly not going to advertise it, but he didn't look right in the last game. They need him to dominate his matchup. You cannot have a situation where Daniel Tice outplays Bam Adebayo, and that's what happened in the last game. Bam was the best player in this series until the last game. He needs to be something close to the best player tonight. The third thing I think that you've got to look at here is maybe a rotation shift. Erik Spoelstra has really tightened the rotation. He's added Solomon Hill minutes, but not many of them, and he's become the eighth guy. I think they need to add another guy to the mix tonight. Whether it's Derrick Jones Jr. or Kelly Olynyk, I think you can make an argument for either. I'm not so sure about Kendrick Nunn tonight, the way that he's been playing. This game is too critical to get him in there to try to find his rhythm. But Kelly Olynyk, although he has not been good with open shots, really hasn't played all that well in a while. I do think if Bam is laboring in any way, to give him another big out there, not a great rebounder, but at least another big body in there with him, and maybe Kelly can hit a couple shots and open things up. There is an argument for Derrick Jones Jr. too. With his activity, he could change a game. He has done this over the course of the year with even a 5 or 6 or 7 minute stint. So for me, from the Heat's perspective, those are the major things. And of course, I didn't even include this as one of the three keys because it goes without saying. They need to make open shots. I mean, as good as the Celtics are, as good as the Celtics have been defensively, Miami has had open shots. They've missed a higher percentage of their open shots than they typically do by a large margin. They make open shots tonight. They get an intense Butler. They get a healthy-looking Bam, and maybe they get a rotation tweak from Spoelstra, and they're going to the NBA Finals. Ethan Skolnick, season ticket, 5 on the floor, 5 Reasons Sports.